Welcome to Northern Vision's television. My name's Anne Cadwallader. I work for the Pat Finucane Centre for Human Rights in Belfast, and I'm talking to Dr. Hajo Meyer. Dr. Meyer was born in Bielefeld in Germany in 1924. At the age of 14, he fled the Nazis to Holland. He was captured there by the Gestapo and survived 10 months in the Auschwitz concentration camp. After the war, he studied theoretical physics and became a researcher at Philips Research Laboratories in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. Retiring in 1984, he's since dedicated himself, apart from his hobby of making violins, I understand, to speaking about the legacy of Auschwitz, its meaning in the modern world, and he's very deeply critical of the Israeli government. Now, Dr. Meyer, a very interesting and indeed stressful life. Your childhood before the war, it was relatively normal.
Yeah, until November 38, I went to normal German school, and the part of the country where I came from, Westphalia, was because the brother of Napoleon Bonaparte became the king of Westphalia, and the Bonapartes both were great admirers and furtherers of the Jewish emancipation. So I think I came from a part of Germany where anti-Semitism was least. I mean, it was certainly present, but as far as I remember, I was till November 38 part of the football team of the class.
So when can you remember Nazism, anti-Semitism first coming into your life?
The first thing I think I remember, I was member of a Jewish youth group which was related to my father's status as a veteran of the First World War, front soldier of the First World War at the Eastern Front. And that was a youth organization which was related to this veterans union. And the first thing, because the Nazis and the Zionists were good friends, the first thing the Nazis did, in any case, as far as my life was concerned, was that union was forbidden, and as I wanted to be in a youth union, but only obviously the Jewish youth union was available. I had to go into a Zionist youth union, but the only one which was allowed, but I didn't like it. No.
Well, so that was the first time as a child that you became. Yes. Were you a child? Were you a teenager or?
No. That look, Hitler came into my life when I mean, actually when I was 9. So it must have been. I could look at that up, but it must be when I was 9 or 10. Yeah.
And was there any kind of pervasive anti-Semitism there, or did you lead your life separate but equal to your German neighbors?
No. Look, I lived my life at school practically equal. As I say, I was member of the football team. I was treated well by the teachers. I got good notes, and my last report from Easter 1938 says his character, his bodily activity, and his intellectual activity are all good. It's a pity that his English has deteriorated a bit. So. Look, 38 at the height, more or less, of Hitler's power, a Jewish boy in a way in a Nazi school. So, no, that was. But my father was a war veteran, and very soon after Hitler took power, and he was a lawyer. All lawyers were forbidden to be lawyers, and only my father, because of his veteran status, was allowed to go on, but that was, I don't know when, but that was then reduced, that he was no longer allowed to wear a gown, and no longer was allowed to bear it, and his title had changed from lawyer to law consultant.
At the age of 14, though, you fled home to the Netherlands, is that right?
Yes.
What caused you to do that? What happened?
Well, I was no longer admitted to school. After the November pogrom, November 1938, no Jews were allowed in a non-Jewish school. And as there was not a Jewish school in Bielefeld, and all other Jewish schools in the country, which my parents tried, were fully occupied. So then there were two places where a Jewish kid could go, had a chance to go. One was Great Britain, where a great number of children came to Great Britain, and a smaller number, but I think 300 or so, came to Holland. And we said, okay, it's high time that I leave the country. And my parents, I don't understand how they could be so stupid, to be quite I mean, I didn't know, but they should have known, because they'd lived through the First World War. They should have expected that Hitler would occupy Holland. So that was not very brilliant, but I managed.
So did you make your own way from home to the Netherlands?
Yeah, sure.
And how did you manage? You just got on a train?
Yeah.
Did you have money, and so you could make your way there?
No, my parents had the money to pay the train fare, and after that I had no money. No, I was.
And did you have relatives in Holland that you went to live with?
No, there were refugee committees, and they so the Dutch Jews paid for it. But I wasn't allowed to go outside a refugee camp. I mean, I could go for a walk, but there was a family, we knew a family in Amsterdam who would have taken me up, but that was not allowed.
And when you went to live in the Netherlands to do your schooling, how long was it after that
No, look, that's a bit more intricate, that I was in 5 different refugee homes. The last one was a very good one, where I learned to be locksmith, and where I was one of the youngest inmates, and the older ones had done academic studies, and so in the evening I had a comrade of, I don't know, in his early 20s, who was a student in Vienna of mathematics, and he taught me mathematics and physics and what have you. So that's how I could bridge the gap of 3 years down school, because not 3 years. I went to school again, because that camp was also emptied by the Germans because it was so good, and actually by Barbie, the how do you call it? The chap who does this in
Barber.
Barbie of Lyon. He was a very notorious assessment. He came and saw to it that this camp was dissolved, and then the refugee committee. And I said I want to go to school, and then they had a Jewish chap who had been the rector of one of our good secondary schools, and he tested me, and he said, okay, he should have the right to go to school, and then it's too intricate, but because I went to a chap. Then I was on the list of being deported, and I went to a chap, a colleague of mine, also a lawyer from Bielefeld, and I wouldn't know why I went to him to say hello, and he said, well, how are you, where are you, what was your status? I said, well, I'm 1 year before my entrance examination, and then he said, no, you stay here, I see to it that you get a little job to be as a postman within the Judenrat, how do you call it, the Jewish administrative center, so you can bring mail about. And another chap whom I know had seen to it that I could visit a private Jewish school.
But anyhow, whatever about all the camps and your education, you did end up on a train.
Sure.
To Auschwitz.
Yeah, no, but look, the Gestapo allowed in April '43 that I did, because that school I went to in the last year had no allowance to take the entrance examination, so I had to take a state entrance examination to the university. But the Gestapo allowed to have that done. There were a lot of Jewish professors who all Jewish professors had been thrown out of university, but they were still fit to take my final entrance examination, and that was valid after the war. So, but then the day after that, I went underground in hiding, and but then I was in March or April, I don't remember.
How old were you at that stage?
19.
19.
19. I was caught.
So you went underground at 19?
No, I went underground 18.
18. And the following year you were caught?
And then I was caught when I was 19, and I had my 20th birthday in Auschwitz. So.
And can you remember the journey? Were you put onto a train with others?
Sure. Look, read any book, so sure that I remember very well. But I had gone through quite a bit before, so I was not so. I mean, the most frightening thing in a sense was when you arrived at Auschwitz and saw all these people who were nearly dead because they were undernourished. So that I can see, but I've never dreamt of it. I was lucky.
You were there for 10 months.
Yeah.
And what were you put to work there?
Yeah, because that's one of the luck factors. I learned to be a metal worker and locksmith, and therefore I was eventually, after we had built up the camp, I was put to work in a railway wagon repair shop.
So you were more of use to them alive than dead?
Yes. In a way, yes. But the most important thing, because I was one of the craftsmen there, but most of them were normal German craftsmen, and therefore the factory was heated. And so in the strong winter of 44, 45, I worked in a closed factory which was heated.
While you were working in the camp in Auschwitz, in a relatively privileged position,
yes.
As in the warmth, as you say, and as a craftsman, were you aware of what was going on around you?
I knew already what was going on when I was in this how do you call that, in this transit camp in Holland. No, there it was known what would happen. Yes.
So you were aware that all the people that they were rushing around from place to place around you, some of them were being murdered.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. And when I arrived in the main camp in Auschwitz, and I saw the gas chambers and the crematoria. Sure, and you could smell them. Yeah, that's absolute.
Because most of us, obviously, who weren't there, have this nightmare vision of a place where people were just taken off trains,
yes,
and almost immediately put to death.
But if you were young and you passed the first selection, you were put to work, and as I was a craftsman, I was eventually, after 2 or 3 months, I don't remember, but in any case, I was put to work in a privileged position, and the privilege had nothing to do, fortunately, with being a capo or whatever. No, because I had a craft, and I had a good friend, also a comrade of mine, a prisoner, Jewish prisoner from Amsterdam, and we were good friends and could trust each other fully. And as I had, after 2 or 3 months, chronic colitis, I didn't eat for 24 hours every week or so in order to stop that, to the diarrhea, and then I would give. Jos was his name. Jos, my food, and when I was better, I got half of it back, and this way we both survived, and we were both liberated, and we came both together back.
What do you feel now about the millions of people who visit Auschwitz every year, who see it almost as a tourist attraction? Some people would say that was macabre and exploitative, whereas others would say that if it teaches people something about the nature of racism, that it's a good thing that people go there. How do you feel as a survivor yourself?
It's too much exploited by, well, especially by the Israelis. They have made of the Holocaust a religion. And I think the only dignified way to commemorate Auschwitz, which you should, is to look at the present day places where ethnic cleansing and mass murder or mass starvation or even slow murder occurs, like for instance in Gaza. That is the right way to commemorate it. But the Holocaust religion of High Priest Elie Wiesel says that there is one dogma. Nobody has ever suffered as the Jews, and nobody will ever suffer as the Jews have, and therefore we can allow us all sorts of things, but whatever we do, it will be less than what happened to us. Well, this is the absolutely wrong lesson. The only clear lesson is never do it to anybody, anywhere. And why? I can even give an argument. I saw that these people, the SS people, who tried to dehumanize us, were no humans anymore themselves. And anybody, any group, any majority group, which tries to dehumanize a minority group for whatever reason, can do so only if they have been dehumanized by propaganda, by schooling, by indoctrination, etc. And I don't want to be dehumanized. I want to remain till my latest breath. I want to remain a dignified human being. And if you do things like they did try with us in Auschwitz, you are no longer humanized. And that is independent of the uniform.
So for you, a visit to Auschwitz is only half the journey. The other journey is to say what happened here was terrible, but there are other terrible things happening, and that the only way to commemorate the people who died in Auschwitz is to say never again, and to look around our world now and say, where is it happening now?
Yeah, exactly. So, and the Holocaust religion says never again to us, and I say never again to anybody by anybody. That and anywhere. That is the look. I'm reading at the very moment. I'm reading a book on ethology, and by a very famous Dutch ethologist, and he says, just like with our talent to pick up and learn languages, there is a part in the brain which sees to it that we can have empathy with people who suffer. And that is even with primates, and he says nearly all mammals and also birds have this feeling for empathy and trying to help. And therefore, I say, if you torture and you deny people the right to live in a dignified and just way, you are dehumanizing yourself to start with.
At the end of the war, when Auschwitz was liberated, and there was the first talk about setting up a separate Israeli state, were you filled with hope that this Israeli state could live in peace with its Palestinian neighbors?
I was not interested in that state, that so-called Jewish state. I come from a Jewish surrounding where they were
integrated
citizens, completely integrated citizens who were members of a central union of German citizens of Jewish belief.
So you believe that Jewish people should live throughout the world, integrated into the communities where they're from, not to have a separate Jewish state?
Look, look, in the First World War, my father shot on Russian Jews, and French Jews shot on German Jews, and the German Jews shot on English Jews when they were on the West Front. So the Judaism is a creed, is a humanitarian creed of great, with great interhuman ethics in it, and that's completely different from Zionism, which is exclusive, which is colonialistic, expansionist, which is imperialist and racist. So,
do you think it would have been, in theory, possible? You may not believe that it's happened, but do you think, in theory, it was possible that, having given their experiences in the Second World War, Jewish people could have set up a state that was non-aggressive and that would have granted equal rights to their neighbours as well? Or was it always a pipe dream, never possible?
No. Look, Zionism is an eschatological ideology which defines also an enemy who hinders the coming into existence of the blissed state, the eschatology hopes, and that's the anti-Semite.
So it was never going to be possible?
Look, but as any of eschatological ideologies, like, say, Stalinism or Bolshevism, I should say, Bolshevism, started out also rather multifaceted, but it ended up in Stalinism. Even Nazism started out multifaceted. The brothers Strasser, who were the first, I think, were even the first one to start the movement, they were national socialists. But it was taken up by all these eschatological ideologies are taken up by the extremists and end up in terrible things.
Have you ever visited Israel?
Yes.
And what do you? How do you feel when you're there?
I wouldn't do not anymore. I now when I visit the region, which I don't think I will do yet, we'll do another time. But I go to Palestine now. I don't want. Look, Israel calls itself a Jewish state, and that is not at all true. It is a Zionist state, and they call themselves a Jewish democracy. Well, they are Jewish for the Palestinians and democratic for the Jews. That is true. There is still some rests of freedom, although it becomes ever more tighter, even on the Jewish citizens, and the Jewish citizens of Israel are so tired and have been so brainwashed that even the massacre on Gaza a year ago did not bring up any masses on the Riven Plain to protest.
It must break your heart.
It does.
When you're there.
That's why I fight.
And you see your people and the survivors of your experiences, and yet they have such different views from your own, and they've created a state that you simply find totally alienated from.
They are not my people. They might have been, and there are doubtlessly, I know some personally, real great Jewish heroes in Israel. But the number of them is so disappointingly small. 20, 30 years ago, you had very great mass demonstrations against certain cruelties the Israelis did. I think probably the last one was after Sabra and Shatila, but I don't know, maybe after that. But the last 10 years or so, no mass demonstration. It is so thin, the people are no longer interested. What did the Israeli Jewish citizens, what did they do? When Gaza was murdered and bombed into rubble, they went on with their kids on the surrounding hills to look. So that is, I don't want to have anything to do with that country.
But you do visit Gaza and the West Bank, do you?
Yeah, if I can, but now I'm 85, so I don't know whether I want. The last time I was there was, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah.
And do
that was in well, it must have been in when 1 week after Gaza, the troops were taken out of Gaza. I visited Gaza. Yeah.
And how do Palestinians view you as a comrade?
Yeah.
As someone that they can completely relate to and talk to?
I have several.
There's no suspicion of.
Oh no, not in the least. I'm often on panels together with Palestinians. Sure. No.
And the Palestinians, of course, have divisions within themselves as well.
Yes.
That must also be heartbreaking for you. That
is an very, very, very good remark. That is one of the great worries, because I know that the division between the Palestinians is so terribly deep. I once visited the ambassadrice of Palestine in The Hague, and when I was critical of Israel, she had a new staff member. They were whilst I was critical of Israel, they were critical of Hamas, and I was deeply shocked. I was deeply shocked, and actually the other day I wanted to go on the Gaza March, the first version, not the second one, and that was also, I think, and others are convinced too, that didn't go through because they wanted to take a great number of very prominent people like Jimmy Carter along, but that was spoiled because, again, because they were some Palestinians were not satisfied that it had been discussed and prepared only by the government and the parliamentarians in Gaza and not with Ramallah. So.
As an outsider, as a non-Palestinian yourself, can you really just sit on the sidelines and say how sorry you are that they are divided, or is there anything you can do? I mean,
no,
is there anything?
I cannot do anything. Look, this belongs to, I think, to Near Eastern society, the tribal, the more or less tribal types of rifts. And no, I can't do anything about it, but I can be very sad about it, and but I can't do anything about it.
When you were living as an eminent physicist in the Netherlands for all those years, were you tortured all the time by what was happening, or did you try to avoid contemplating?
No, look, it really. I was not interested in Israel, and I became very much critical. I think in the 80s when Sharon, Sharon and Begin, when Begin became prime minister and Sharon was the highest chap in the army, then it was clear to me that this was not a good country. Then before that, I had a cousin in Israel. I visited it, and he was a lefty, but he had no good insight either. And I didn't see it. I didn't see the real thing, because I remember that he showed me Ariel. That's one of the settlements, and was proud of it, but I was not, at that time, not keen enough to see what it really was.
So what made you decide to speak out then? Was it historical and political events happening in Israel itself, or was it something within yourself that decided that this was the time when you had to speak out?
No, so, look, I think Sabra and Shatila was one of the very, very important events. And well, Begin and Sharon, and well, it became. I think it gets worse every day. So I don't know. And well, yeah. At a certain moment, I wrote articles in Dutch papers, and then two editors, two different publishers came to me and asked me whether I would write a book. So I don't know. I really don't know.
You slipped into it. It wasn't any big decision. It was just one thing led to another.
I slipped into it, and yeah, that's how it is. Yeah.
And what kind of response did you get from other Jews living in in Netherlands? Was it instant hostility, or was there some support?
Oh
for it?
yes, look, I'm the black sheep of the, but I have no connection whatsoever to other than very critical Jews. No.
And it's always very, very hard for someone who steps outside the group and who becomes critical of the group.
Yeah, but look, I was never, had never any religious education of any depth. And look, if you have four Jewish grandparents and you have survived Auschwitz, you cannot say I'm not a Jew. The only thing the Jews in the world have common is not race, is not religion, because I'm not absolutely not religious. Is not a people. It's not a people. The only thing that they have in common is a certain socio-cultural heritage. That is my tie with Judaism. And I try to defend Judaism, although I'm absolutely not practicing it. But there is a branch of Judaism which is beautiful, which is very near, actually, to Christianism, with the only exception that those Jews who have ethics high in their banner do not accept that Jesus Christ was the Messiah. And so there it is. And when I talk to Dutch theologians who are very well versed, because they are Calvinist, well versed in the Old Testament, and I always say, yeah, Rabbi Joshua ben Yosef of Nazareth was the first Reform rabbi. Do you agree? They all agree, yes. So the Reform rabbis tried to centralize the ethical, the interhuman ethical ideas put into the center of Reform Judaism, and the Zionists took the worst chapters of the Old Testament, namely the book Joshua, which teaches the then time Jews how to ethnically cleanse.
Many people in the world look at Zionism and at how the Israelis are treating the Palestinians, and say, how can a people who were so discriminated against and victimized themselves turn around and do something not entirely the same, but on the same lines as their own ethnic experience?
And there is a well-known phenomenon in psychiatry, and that's called the battered child syndrome. You know that? Okay. So that's just happening. It's the battered child syndrome, and it's very, very sad that it happened. But, I mean, to just enlarge a bit, it is just as during the Second World War, and the crimes, the mega crimes against the Jews. It was not only the Nazis and the Germans who were guilty. The whole world, the whole Western Christian world let it happen. And it's the same now. I mean, it are not the Israelis now who maltreat, in my opinion, the Palestinians, but the whole world looks and does nothing. So the whole Western Christian world is at least morally co-guilty, and that saddens me very much.
I'm sure it's a mystery to many Palestinians why the United Nations passes resolutions and the US ignores them and the Israeli government ignore them. And there are no wars, there are no boycotts, there are no sustained political campaigns to persuade the Israeli government that their line they're going down is wrong in terms of human rights and in terms of their own future and politics. Do you have any explanation for that? Why Western governments, as you say, don't enforce the resolutions at the United Nations?
It's a very good question, and I think many dissertations can be written about it. I've written a little booklet about it, and one of the main factors, but by no means all, but one of the main factors is the exploitation of a justified guilt feeling of the Western Christian world by the Israelis, and they blackmail the Western politicians who are near to utter a critical word. Oh, I see. Yeah, that's the old Western Christian anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism which comes up. So and so let themselves. In other words, in a blackmail situation, the one who blackmails is the main criminal, but the one who lets himself blackmail is criminal too. And that holds for the whole Western world, and especially, for instance, Mrs. Merkel, the German Chancellor, who thinks it is appropriate to think of the liberation of Auschwitz together with Shimon Peres. It's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. So,
do you have any sympathy at all for the point of view that the Israeli government is still frightened of its future, that it has to defend itself, that Hamas still has not accepted that Israel has a right to exist, and that therefore they're quite justified in taking their political attitude that they do?
Not at all. When I was a boy, a Jewish boy in Nazi Germany, and we had the big pogrom of November 1938, we Jewish boys would say to each other, "Have you heard there comes a new pogrom?" Why? I have not. Yeah, there comes a new pogrom. Why? Haven't you heard? In the harbor of Kiel, a Jewish perambulator tried to ram a German battlefield, and the Germans feel attacked. So, my boy, the only atom power in the Near East, and the Palestinians have nothing else than their own body to sacrifice in order to give some fight. No, look, I'm sorry to say, but it's historical fact. When the second man to Hitler, Göring, was interrogated by a psychiatrist in the prison of Nuremberg, where he was, he asked him, Mr. Göring, how did you do that you could get so many people behind you? And Göring answered, look, it's very, very simple. If you say that some group outside your own wants is a threat to your existence, that you start, and you give arguments why they do want to do that, etc. And then, if somebody doubts whether this is true, you call the doubter a traitor of the existence of the fatherland, or of the being true to the fatherland values, then you can get anything you want. Well, and that is what's happening. It's absolutely ridiculous that the Palestinians or the Arab countries have no interest in there are no competition in military and economic terms to Israel.
Because some people would look at Israel, which is small in terms of territory, rich in terms of foreign influence, and see the country surrounded by Arab states and say, well, Israel has a right to feel defensive and has a right to arm itself and has a right, and maybe not a right, but it's understandable that they take the attitude they take to the Palestinians because they feel beset on all four corners.
No, I don't agree to that at all, because they have rockets, they have atom bombs to go with it, and the times have changed. This strategical concept have changed so greatly, and there is, in my opinion, no chance that they are attacked by anybody. I can't see it, and I see it as that it is that fear is used as a mechanism to manipulate the population in Israel. And fear, look, humiliation and fear are, in my opinion, one of the greatest historical forces you have. And humiliation is done from the outside. Fear is stimulated from the inside, and both can be manipulated. And that is how aggressive states come into being and operate. And the great tragedy is Zionism was invented to avoid and break the walls of the ghetto. And what have the Israelis done? Built the biggest ghetto of the world.
Of course, we're talking here in Belfast, and the community here, now this is a very rough generalization, and a very crude one, but there would be more sympathy in the Catholic stroke nationalist stroke Republican community for the Palestinian cause, and more sympathy in the unionist stroke Protestant stroke loyalist community for the Israeli cause. And there was an incident some years ago where you had lampposts in Belfast that simultaneously had a Nazi swastika and an Israeli blue and white Israeli Star of David on the same lamppost, supporting two very, very different. But I suppose, looking at it from your perspective, that would make sense.
Yeah, I explained the reason why there are parallel eschatological ideology with an enemy, which sooner or later will lead to extermination, slow or fast, and the nationalist blood and soil type of ideology. Yes, I can't tell, and that's the reason why the generation of my parents already saw that parallel and didn't want to be Zionist, because they say, look, we are here, we were suffering from Nazis, we won't want to let other people suffer from Zionism. So, and I tell you one thing, because that was a question was asked in one of my talks the last few days. If you could have gone earlier or if your parents could have gone earlier to Israel because it existed earlier, they could have been saved. But I learned in Auschwitz, trying to survive at the cost of whoever other human being makes your life senseless. That leads to post-traumatic stress syndrome and will end up that you will burn your house or beat up your wife and kids because you cannot live with yourself. No. Surviving makes only sense if you do it in a humane way. Otherwise, it's self-destructive. That's my firm opinion, and I learned that in Auschwitz. And as I say, the SS men there were not human anymore, and so the soldiers who walked along the kids without arms or legs were no humans anymore.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Hajo, for talking to us. It was a very provocative interview and has given me certainly a lot to think about.
Thank you for the privilege to be able to talk to you.